True Home Alone horror stories. The Thief and Eternal Imprisonment. Tom Briggs, a veteran thief, never believed in ghost stories or curses. To him, everything has a price and nothing is unstealable. He is confident in his skills, seeing abandoned mansions and antiques as easy targets. That night, Tom entered an old villa at the end of a suburban neighborhood. The house looked dilapidated and had been abandoned for years, but there was rumor of an ancient wooden box inside, which was said to be priceless on the black market. No guards, no security system. Just take the box and disappear. Easy job. Tom Briggs approached the old house with a light but confident step. The night sky was pitch black, the moon hidden by clouds, and only the wind whistling through the bare trees created a chilly atmosphere. The rusty iron gate creaked as he pushed gently. He didn't care about the creepy look of the house to Tom. It was all just something that got in the way of his treasure. After a closer look, Tom realized that the main door was broken. The lock was rotten, and with just one push, the door swung open with a dry creak. The air inside the house was cold and heavy, as if the house had been forgotten for centuries. Tom shined his flashlight, the light sweeping across peeling walls and dusty furniture. It was a completely normal room until he saw the ancient wooden box in the middle of the living room. The box stood out from everything else in the house. Its wood was dark brown, shiny, and unmarked by time. No lock, no hinges, just a square box, waiting to be opened. Tom smirked, thinking, the rumors are true, but it doesn't seem so scary. Little did he know that the next moment would change his life forever. No lock, no hinges, just a square box, waiting to be opened. Tom smirked, thinking, the rumors are true, but it doesn't seem so scary. Little did he know that the next moment would change his life forever. Tom picked up the box, realizing it was much heavier than it looked. However, that did not discourage him. He gently pried the lid open, and a soft click sounded. The box opened easily, as if it had been waiting for someone to open it for centuries. Inside was a silver grandfather clock, gleaming under the flashlight. The hands were stopped at an odd position, 12 o'clock sharp, and not moving at all. Along with the watch, there was also an old piece of paper, written in scribbled handwriting. Time is the only thing that cannot be stolen. Whoever touches this box will suffer eternal punishment. Tom sneered. Just some cheap scare. He did not believe in curses. To him, time was just a concept, and this watch would help him earn a fortune. But as soon as Tom closed the lid of the box, the clock began to tick. The ticking sound was deafening in the silence. Before Tom could react, he felt everything around him spin. Tom blinked, but when he opened his eyes, the scenery around him had completely changed. The old house was now clean, bright, and tidy. The walls were decorated with classical paintings, and the crystal chandelier on the ceiling gave off a warm light. Tom looked around, startled to find that the wooden box and the clock were gone. He ran to the door, but it was locked now. The windows were made of thick glass, impossible to break through. He called out, "Is anyone there?" But only his own echo answered. Time passed, or so Tom thought. He tried everything to escape, but the doors and windows seemed to be sealed by some invisible force. Tom felt as if he were trapped in some strange trap, unable to escape no matter what he did. Every time he sat down to rest, the ticking clock rang in his head again, a reminder that he was imprisoned by the very time he once despised. Tom had no idea how much time had passed, and the concepts of day and night were becoming blurred. He felt no hunger, no thirst, no fatigue, but his mind was becoming more and more confused. The ticking of the clock haunted him constantly, as if it was etched into his every thought. He began to hear whispers echoing through the house. At first, they were just small noises like the wind blowing through a crack in the door. But then the whispers became clearer, repeating the same phrase over and over again. Time is the enemy of the greedy. Tom tried to cover his ears, but it was no use. The voice was not coming from outside, but from within his own mind. One day, or at least Tom thought it was one day, he saw a figure appear in the house. It was a tall, thin man, wearing a black cloak, his face as hazy as smoke. The man said nothing, just looked at Tom with lifeless eyes. Tom shouted, "Who are you? Let me go." The man smiled, a cold and unfamiliar smile. "You stole the time capsule, and now you must pay. This is eternal imprisonment from which no thief can escape." Tom tried to lunge forward, but his body wouldn't move. It was as if time had stopped, trapping him in an endless moment. Days later, Tom realizes the terrible truth. He is trapped in an endless time loop. Every time he tries to escape or do something else, time will return to the moment he opened the box. Everything repeats endlessly, with no way out. Every time the loop starts again, the mysterious man appears and reminds him, "Time cannot be stolen, and those who dare will live in eternal imprisonment." Tom gradually lost his sense of self. No longer knowing what was real and what was imaginary, he only knew that he would be stuck in this house forever, with the box and the never-ending ticking clock. Tom Briggs, a veteran thief who once did not believe in curses or supernatural forces, eventually fell victim to time. Forever trapped in a loop of regret and despair, with the clock ticking like a never-ending sentence. And the old house still stands there, like a trap waiting for the next curious person. It is rumored that whenever someone enters, they will hear the ghostly laughter of a thief trapped in eternal time. But no one dares stay long enough to verify. Black shadow in the inventory. Jack Morgan, a hard-working mechanic in a small Oregon town, never paid much attention to Halloween. To him, it was just another day at work. While the town bustles with costumes, jack-o'-lanterns, and children's laughter, Jack is busy on his night shift. His job was simple: repair some equipment in the workshop and check the backup generator. The wind blew harder than usual, carrying with it a biting cold and the rustling of dry leaves. Jack's workshop was far from the center of town, hidden down a deserted road. Darkness covered the entire yard, with only a faint light from a single bulb on the electric pole. In that gloomy atmosphere, Jack received a text message from the manager. Check the backup generator before leaving the factory. Feeling a little dissatisfied, Jack frowned. He knew he had to go to the storage room, a task he hated the most since meeting that strange shadow. But he had no other choice. Around midnight, Jack walked out into the yard, flashlight in hand and the barn key. The night was strangely silent, without the usual laughter or children's footsteps. The houses near the factory had turned off their lights, leaving the scene deserted and eerie. The familiar feeling came back, cold and uneasy, as if someone was waiting for him in the darkness. He shook his hand as he unlocked the door, and the warehouse door let out a long, mournful creak. Inside the warehouse, it was dark and damp, the air thick with stench. He turned on the overhead light. The dim light flickered a few times before coming back on completely. But as soon as he looked towards the end of the warehouse, his heart sank. The familiar shadow appeared again, this time clearer and more terrifying than before. The figure stood motionless in the corner, tall and indistinct as if it were made of darkness itself. Jack's heart pounded. He quickly turned on the flashlight, but the small light could not dispel the dense darkness. Suddenly, the ceiling light went out, leaving him in absolute darkness. In the darkness, Jack heard a soft whisper, as if someone were talking right next to his ear. "Gone, gone, but I'm still here." The voice was deep and cold, sending goosebumps up his spine. Jack tried to suppress his fear, but his legs felt frozen in place. The sound of metal clanging against metal came from behind, as if something was moving in the darkness. Jack groped for the exit, but the door was locked from the outside. He pounded on it, the sound echoing eerily. The feeling of being trapped and hunted almost made him panic. As Jack struggled desperately, a cold air blew past him. The dark figure from the corner of the warehouse began to move, each step seeming to melt into the darkness around him. Jack tried to scream, but his throat was choked, unable to make a sound. Just as he thought the shadow was about to reach him, the ceiling light suddenly turned back on. The light dispelled the shadow, but the creepy feeling remained. Jack gasped, trying to regain his composure. He found the emergency key on the wall and opened the door. As he rushed out, Jack fell to his knees on the cold ground, his heart still pounding. Mike, Jack's colleague, has just arrived. Seeing Jack lying there panting, he quickly helped his friend up. "What are you doing that makes you look like you just saw a ghost?" Mike asked, half joking. Jack looked into his friend's eyes and told him everything. Mike frowned. "Do you know what happened here?" he asked, his face serious. Mike said that many years ago, there was a serious accident at this factory. The warehouse door was suddenly slammed shut, and no one knew why it was locked from the outside. Howard was trapped all night, and when he was found the next morning, he was no longer breathing. From then on, rumors of Howard's ghost began to spread. "Maybe you've seen Howard," Mike joked, but his eyes were slightly worried. After Mike's story, Jack felt a chill down his spine. He reported the incident to his manager and quit his job immediately. He didn't want to face that shadow again. But it didn't stop there. Even though he had moved to a new job, Jack still felt like something was watching him. Every time he walked through dark rooms or passed by a deserted warehouse, he would involuntarily turn his head to look back, afraid that he would see the shadow of Howard Blake, the dark shadow in the warehouse that day. And Jack knew that no matter how far he ran, that darkness would always follow closely behind. One day, it would come back, waiting for the right moment to find him again. Knocking from inside the locked warehouse. Tom Pearson hates Halloween. He hates the noise, the ridiculous costumes, and the constant interruptions when kids knock on his door asking for candy. So on Halloween, he chose to stay home alone and ignore the hustle and bustle outside. His house was on the edge of town, secluded and quiet, where few people came. After dinner, Tom sat on the sofa, his book open but his mind elsewhere. Through the living room window, he could see the old barn in the corner of the backyard. The warehouse door had been locked for a long time, never opened. It was something that Tom had not bothered about until tonight. At 11 o'clock at night, in the quiet atmosphere, Tom heard a knock coming from the warehouse. He frowned. Who would be knocking on the barn this late at night? It must be some kind of prank. Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the backyard. The barn was still dark in the pale moonlight. The door was still locked. No one was there. He shivered, but told himself it was probably just the wind hitting the wood. He turned back to his chair, trying to read his book. But just then, the knocking sounded again. This time, the sound was clearer and more rhythmic, as if someone was deliberately trying to get his attention. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. He grabbed his flashlight, put on his coat, and decided to go outside to investigate. As he stepped out into the yard, the cold wind blew against his face, carrying with it the rustling sound of dry leaves. The feeling that something was wrong weighed heavily on his heart. Tom walked up to the door of the warehouse. He carefully shined his flashlight on the lock. It was intact, showing no signs of tampering. But as he placed his hand on the door, a knock sounded behind him. Tom spun around. The backyard was empty, no one there. The wind whistled through the dead branches, making the air even colder. He shined his flashlight everywhere, but saw only darkness. His heart pounded in his chest. He decided to open the warehouse door. Tom took the spare key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. When the door swung open with an eerie creak, a blast of cold air blew out, making him shiver. It was pitch black inside. He turned on his flashlight and peered inside, just old tools, cobwebs hanging from wooden crates. No one was there. But before he could step outside, the warehouse door slammed shut behind him. The sound was dry, making him jump. He turned and tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge, as if someone had locked it from the outside. Tom pounded on the door. "Is anyone out there?" He shouted, but only his own echo answered. Then, from deep in the darkness of the warehouse, came a knock. Knock, knock. His heart stopped. The knocking didn't come from outside the door this time. It came from inside the warehouse, right next to where he was standing. He shined his flashlight around, but saw nothing but old objects and thick darkness. The knocking sounded again, closer, as if something were approaching him. Tom began to gasp. Fear gripped his body. He tried to knock on the door again, but to no avail. In the midst of his despair, he heard a soft whisper behind him. "Don't open it." He turned, shining the flashlight in the direction of the whispering. The weak beam of the flashlight illuminated a shadowy figure. It stood motionless, shapeless, as if made of the darkness itself. Tom felt his body stiffen, unable to move. The shadow did not move, but its presence made the space seem still. He could hear his heart pounding in his chest, and then the shadow began to move. It crept toward him, inch by inch, making no sound, like part of the gathering night. In a panic, Tom pounded on the door with all his might. It suddenly flew open, sending him tumbling out. He scrambled to his feet, slammed the door shut, and locked it, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Out of control, the knocking stopped. The darkness outside was silent, as if nothing had happened. He breathed heavily, leaning against the wall, trying to regain his composure. But as he entered the house, a soft knock sounded from the living room window. Knock, knock, knock. Tom turned his head and looked. Through the glass, he saw a shadow, the same shadow he had seen in the warehouse. Tom locked all the doors, drew the curtains, and turned on every light in the house. But he knew that no matter what he did, the thing had found him. In the darkness, the knocking echoed from the hidden corners of the house. It was no longer limited to the shed. It followed him inside, creeping into every wall, every dark corner. Tom knew he would never escape the knocking. And each time it rang, the shadow would come a little closer until there was nothing between them. This Halloween night, Tom opened a door that should never have been opened. And from now on, that door will never truly close. Ghost on the Run. One dark night in El Paso, Texas, 4 young men, Carlos, Jake, Manny, and Tyler, decide to carry out a daring mission. They heard rumors of a deserted house deep in the suburbs where no one came. The old house had been abandoned for a long time, surrounded by a rotting fence and overgrown trees. Rumors of the house being linked to mysterious events kept locals away. But for Carlos' group, it was just an easy opportunity to pick up some valuables. Just some junk, Carlos, the leader of the group, sneered. We'll go in, take what we can sell, and leave before anyone knows it. The group piled into Tyler's black all-terrain vehicle and drove out into the suburbs. The night air was cold and strangely quiet, giving Manny a creeping feeling. But they didn't pay much attention, just wanted to quickly complete the mission. When they arrived, the house appeared in the darkness, even more terrifying than they had imagined. The windows were broken, the front door shook with every gust of wind, and the shadows of the trees around the yard formed strange shapes. A musty smell hung in the air, as if time had stood still in this place. It's just an old house, Jake whispered, trying to calm his fear. Carlos took the lead, pushing the door open. The creaking echoed in the empty space. Manny's flashlight scanned the house. Everything was covered in dust and cobwebs, old furniture scattered about. But Carlos quickly found a few antique ornaments that looked valuable and stuffed them into his pocket. This is easier than I thought, Carlos grinned triumphantly. Let's go. But as the group prepared to leave, a soft noise came from behind the house, making them pause. Hear that? Tyler asked, eyes wide. Probably a stray cat, Carlos dismissed, but a look of concern crossed his face. Then suddenly, from the dark corner at the end of the hallway, a shadow appeared. hazy but clear, as if it were watching them. The group froze for a moment. The shadow had no face, just a humanoid shape, tall and still, as if it were one with the night. "Run!" Carlos shouted. The group rushed outside like crazy, their feet hitting debris and rotting doors. Manny's heart was pounding, his breath coming in short gasps of panic. As Tyler jumped into the AGV and started the engine, Carlos glanced back. The shadow was still there by the front door. But then it moved, fast and smooth as smoke, and began to follow the group. "Get in," Tyler yelled, slamming his hands on the steering wheel. They all jumped in, and Tyler stepped on the gas. The tires spun, kicking up dust and rubble. The car sped off into the night, leaving the house behind. But even as it sped down the dirt road, the shadow followed closely behind, as if it were not limited by speed or terrain. Jake looked in the rearview mirror and saw the shadow gliding along the ground, not slowing down. It's still following us," Jake shouted, panicked. Carlos turned to look and felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Even though Tyler was accelerating at full speed, the shadow was like their own shadow, impossible to shake off. The chase continued through the winding suburban roads. Tyler drove like crazy, dodging trees and potholes. But every time they thought they had left the shadow behind, it would appear right behind them without a sound. At this moment, the only sound in the car was rapid breathing and panicked heartbeat. Tyler hissed through gritted teeth. How could it? Carlos tried to stay calm, but fear gripped his mind. The shadow was not human, that much was clear, and it would not stop. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the group of young men drove into Tyler's neighborhood, where the streetlights shone brightly. As soon as the tires hit the concrete, Jake looked back. The shadow was gone. There was no trace of it. The group sat in the car, their hearts still racing. The dense darkness of the suburbs seemed more terrifying than ever. Tyler turned off the engine, but no one dared to get out. Once they had regained some composure, the group entered Tyler's house. The feeling of safety in a brightly lit house made them breathe a little easier. But no one forgot the shadow that had followed them. Carlos sat down on the couch, his head in his hands. "What the hell just happened?" he muttered. Manny, always sensitive to the strange, decided to do some research on the house they had just broken into. He opened his phone and browsed local websites. Within minutes, he found what he was looking for, an old newspaper article about the house. "The house has been the site of many mysterious events," Manny whispered. "Many people have been imprisoned illegally, and horrific events have never been explained. Locals believe the place is haunted." The group fell silent. No one wanted to believe in ghosts, but what they had just experienced could not be explained by logic. "We took something out of there," Tyler muttered, looking at the bag of items Carlos had taken from the house. Maybe it wanted what was its. Carlos froze. He stared at the bag, but did not dare open it. Even though the shadow no longer followed them on their way home, the group still felt fear creeping into every dark corner. In the following days, the group did not dare to return to the abandoned house, nor did they dare to keep the items that Carlos had taken. Carlos knew that, despite running away and throwing away everything they had taken, the darkness from that abandoned house had never truly left them. Lisa, a woman in her 30s, had just moved to Chicago to start a new job. She was not a believer in superstitions or the supernatural, and she felt very lucky to have found a cheap apartment in the city center. The apartment was located in an old building that still retained its ancient charm with the elegant beauty of Victorian architecture. Lisa was initially attracted by the large windows and natural light that flooded into each room. The only thing that bothered her was the large old mirror that hung on the bedroom wall. It seemed a little mysterious with its intricately carved wooden frame and the glass that had faded and become opaque over time. Lisa didn't care too much about the mirror. She thought it was part of the history of the house and decided to keep it because it fit the space quite well. The first few days of living here, everything went smoothly. Lisa focused on her new job and quickly adapted to life in Chicago. However, after only a week, she began to notice a few strange things. It all started one night when Lisa was getting ready for bed. She felt like someone was watching her. The feeling was so strong that she turned around to look around the room, but there was no one but her reflection in the old mirror. At that time, Lisa just shrugged and told herself that maybe she was too stressed about her new job. But the next night, while brushing her teeth in the bathroom, she once again felt someone's eyes staring at her. Looking into the bathroom mirror, Lisa only saw her own face, but that creepy feeling did not go away. Over the next few weeks, Lisa began to experience increasingly frightening events. One night, as she lay in bed, drifting off to sleep, she heard soft footsteps coming from the living room. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she tried to stay calm, reassuring herself that it was just the sound of old apartments where floorboards could make strange noises. However, the footsteps did not stop, but got closer and closer to the bedroom. Lisa could not bear it anymore. She sat up, turned on the light, and went out to check, but the living room was completely empty. Another night, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she decided to go to the kitchen to get some water. As she was walking through the bedroom to the hallway, she glanced at the mirror and was startled. For a fleeting moment, Lisa saw a shadow pass behind her in the mirror. She turned around immediately, but there was no one there. She stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what she had just seen, but her heart was pounding and the shivering feeling wouldn't go away. She convinced herself it was just a tired hallucination and decided not to worry too much about it. However, the strange phenomenon did not stop there. In the following nights, Lisa continued to feel as if someone was in the apartment with her. The feeling of being watched was always there, especially when she was in the bedroom. The mirror, which had once been a classic decoration, now became a source of obsession. Every time Lisa looked at it, she felt a strange, inexplicable presence. Then one night, things got even more terrifying. It was a cold November night. Outside, snow was falling lightly and the wind was whistling through the windows. Lisa had just come home from a late night at work. She was tired and just wanted to rest. After a shower, she climbed into bed and turned off the lights. The light from the street lamp outside filtered through the curtains, casting a dim light on the mirror. Lisa lay still, trying to close her eyes but couldn't sleep. An invisible anxiety kept taking over her mind. She turned to look at the mirror again, and this time her heart stopped. Inside the mirror, there was a blurry figure standing silently looking at her. The person had no clear face, just a blurry figure with dark eyes and a pale face. Lisa sat up in panic, but the black figure remained still in the mirror. It did not move, did not disappear, just stood there, observing her in a terrifying way. Lisa screamed in panic and turned on the bedroom light. As the light flooded the room, the shadow disappeared, leaving only Lisa with a pale face and a pounding heart in her chest. She couldn't believe her eyes. Terrified, she didn't dare turn off the light and sat on the bed all night, waiting for morning. The next morning, Lisa knew she couldn't live in the apartment any longer. She called her friends and told them what had happened. Although some people thought she was overstressed and imagining things, Lisa was adamant that what she saw was real. She decided to remove the mirror from the wall and throw it away, hoping that everything would return to normal. But the horror didn't stop there. After the mirror was taken down and removed, Lisa continued to feel a strange presence in the apartment. She began to hear whispers at night, even when she was alone. Sometimes she felt a cold air sweep over her, seemingly out of nowhere. One day, while cleaning her bedroom, she suddenly discovered a long, deep scratch on the wall, right where the mirror used to hang. The scratch looked like it was made by someone's fingernails, extending from the ceiling to almost the ground. Lisa couldn't take it anymore. She decided to move out of the apartment immediately, regardless of the rent she had paid in advance. Even though she had moved out, the memories of the shadow in the mirror and the sleepless nights still haunted her. The Chicago apartment left Lisa with an indescribable fear, and from then on, she never dared to look into the old mirrors again. John and Emily are newlyweds who have just moved into an old house in a quiet suburb of Virginia. The house is over a century old and has a classic look with wood paneling, large windows, and period furniture. The couple enjoys the home for its warmth and history, but there is one thing that makes Emily uneasy: a large antique mirror hanging in the living room. The mirror had an intricately carved oak frame with intricate floral designs. The glass had become cloudy with age, and there were strange stains on it, making it look as if it was covered in a layer of mist. Although Emily found the mirror unsettling, John thought it was a valuable antique and decided to keep it. At first, life in the house was peaceful. The couple gradually adapted to their new life, busy decorating and renovating the house. However, not long after, Emily began to notice strange things happening around the antique mirror. One evening, while cleaning the living room, Emily happened to glance into the mirror and noticed something was wrong. Her reflection in the mirror seemed blurry, and for a moment, she seemed to see her face change. The face in the mirror no longer looked like her. It was a pale face with deep-set eyes and a ghostly smile. She blinked and the image disappeared, but the creepy feeling remained. Emily tried to convince herself that it was just a hallucination caused by the dim light. But the strange phenomena did not stop there. Late one night, John was reading in the living room when he suddenly felt the space around him turn cold. A cold air from somewhere filled the room, even though the fireplace was still burning brightly. As John looked into the mirror, he felt as if something was watching him. He slowly approached the mirror, and to his horror, he saw a small child standing behind him, even though he knew full well that he and Emily were the only ones in the house. The child had pale skin, sunken eyes, and disheveled hair. John whirled around, but no one was there. He looked back at the mirror, but the child was gone. John didn't say anything to Emily about it, thinking he was just tired and imagining things. But a few days later, Emily started having strange dreams. In them, she would often find herself standing in front of a mirror, but instead of seeing her reflection, she would see another room, a dark, musty room with old wooden tables and chairs that swayed as if someone had just left. She would also see the shadow of a woman passing by behind her, but her face was always blurry. Things got worse when Emily started hearing strange noises coming from the living room at night. Sometimes she heard whispers coming from the mirror, but couldn't make out what was being said. One night, as she was walking through the living room, Emily heard soft footsteps, as if someone was moving around. She called out to John, but there was no answer, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw the shadowy figure of a woman standing behind her in the mirror. The figure seemed to be looking straight at her with a ghostly smile, but when Emily turned around, the room was completely empty. Emily began to panic and told John about her experience. The couple began to research the house and its previous owners. They discovered that the mirror had been in the house for a long time, even before the previous owners moved in. Rumor has it that the first owner of the house was a wealthy woman named Eleanor, who lived alone and died mysteriously. After her death, many people said that her spirit still lingered in the house, and perhaps the mirror was the portal between her world and this world. John and Emily decided to take the mirror down and put it in storage, hoping that the strange phenomena would stop. However, things only got worse. On the first night after the mirror was put away, both husband and wife had the same nightmare. In the dream, they were trapped inside the house, surrounded by rotting wooden walls, and every time they tried to escape, the mirror appeared in every corner, as if it was clinging to them. In the mirror, their images were no longer intact but horribly distorted, as if they were being slowly sucked into the world inside the mirror. The next day, both John and Emily were shocked to realize that they had both had the same dream. This only reinforced their belief that the mirror was indeed an evil thing. They decided to call a repairman to remove the mirror from the house forever. When the repairman arrived, he was also concerned and said that the mirror seemed to be haunted. When they finally removed the mirror and took it away, a strange sense of relief filled the house. However, as soon as the mirror was moved outside, John noticed a strange crack in the glass, like a handprint from within. It made them both shudder, but they decided not to think about it anymore. After the mirror was removed, no more strange phenomena occurred in the house. But John and Emily still could not forget what they had experienced. Even though the house returned to normal, they always felt that there was something lingering, as if the mirror was only temporarily blocked and could return at any time. And from then on, they always avoided antique mirrors, never daring to keep them in the house again. Tom, a frequent business traveler, is used to traveling from city to city and staying in many hotels. On a business trip to California, he checks into an old hotel with a long history. The hotel is located on the edge of a small town, with an old-fashioned appearance and architectural style that dates back to the 1920s. Tom always loved places with such a rich history because it brought a sense of nostalgia and romance. However, he did not expect that this time, his experience would turn into a horrible nightmare. When Tom entered the room, he noticed that everything was very clean and tidy. There was a spacious double bed, a large window overlooking the mountains in the distance, and a large mirror hung on the wall opposite the bed. The mirror had a wooden frame carved with intricate patterns, looking like a precious antique. Tom felt a little strange that the mirror was placed in the middle of the room, opposite the bed, but he didn't mind it much. After packing his things, Tom decided to go down to the hotel restaurant for dinner. The meal went smoothly, but when he returned to his room, a feeling of unease began to creep into his mind. The room, which had seemed normal and comfortable before, now seemed stuffy and cold. Tom turned off the lights, got into bed, and pulled the covers up, but the large mirror opposite him made him uncomfortable. Every time he opened his eyes, he saw his reflection in the mirror, which made him feel uneasy. However, Tom tried to ignore that feeling and fell asleep. Around midnight, Tom suddenly woke up. He didn't know what had woken him up, but a strange cold feeling spread throughout the room. The room was completely quiet, except for his soft breathing and the wind whistling through the window. Tom stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out why he felt so nervous. But when he turned his head to look at the mirror, his heart clenched. In the mirror, he saw a shadow moving from one corner of the room to the other. The shadow was shapeless, but it looked like a person moving slowly. Tom jumped up at once and turned his head to look toward the corner of the room, but the room was still empty. There was no one there, no sign of anyone having entered. Tom's heart was pounding, but he tried to calm himself down. He told himself that it was just an illusion, probably caused by the dim light in the room. However, the feeling of unease in Tom's heart did not lessen. He decided to turn on the light and check the entire room. Everything was as before, nothing unusual. But his eyes kept being drawn to the mirror. Despite himself, he looked into it again, and this time, a real sense of horror came over him. Inside the mirror, Tom clearly saw a man standing behind him, just a few feet away. The man had a pale face, empty eyes, and a terrifying, twisted smile. Tom was completely stunned, unable to move, unable to take his eyes off the horrifying image. After a few seconds, he turned around, but the room was still empty. Only silence and cold air surrounded him. When he looked back at the mirror again, the figure had disappeared. In a panic, Tom jumped out of bed, dressed quickly, and left the room. He didn't pay any attention to the clock or the time. He just knew he had to leave the hotel immediately. Down in the lobby, Tom told the receptionist that he couldn't stay in that room any longer and asked to change rooms immediately. The receptionist, looking surprised but not entirely surprised, asked which room he wanted. Tom just asked for any room, as long as it didn't have a large mirror facing the bed. The clerk nodded silently and changed his room without asking any further questions. Tom checked into his new room and tried to forget what had just happened, but the image in the mirror would not leave his mind. He could not sleep that night, and every time he closed his eyes, the face of the man in the mirror appeared again with a crooked smile and dark eyes. The next morning, Tom decided to leave the hotel earlier than planned. Before leaving, he met the employee from last night and asked curiously, "Is there something wrong with the mirror in room 205? The employee looked at him with a slightly worried look, then lowered his voice. "You are not the first person to ask about that mirror. This hotel has a long history, and there are rumors that the mirrors in some rooms can reflect things not of this world." Tom didn't believe it, but his experience left all reason seemingly in a blur. He left the hotel with the feeling that he had encountered something inexplicable, something beyond human understanding. Since that trip, Tom has never dared to look into any mirrors in the hotels he has stayed in. Whenever he enters a room, the first thing he does is turn the mirror away or ask for a room without a mirror. Although the events at the California hotel remain a mystery to him, Tom knows that the image of the man in the mirror with the creepy smile will forever haunt his mind. If this story is good, please like and subscribe to wait for the next videos.